When I started this series, I wanted it to be about ranking sustainable brands, basically about taking brands that claim they're sustainable and then breaking it down and telling you what I do and don't trust about them. But during that series, that so far there are 3 parts to, and you should go watch, I'll link them down below, a lot of the requests have been for bigger brands, asking me to evaluate big brands that I personally usually try to avoid. But because they were so highly requested, I decided, here's your video. This is going to be me ranking 5 of the biggest, most commonly asked about brands from you. And I always get the brands that you're requesting from either the comments of the videos or on my Instagram, so make sure you leave a comment below and go follow me over on the gram. The 5 big brands that you've requested are Walmart. I hate Walmart with a passion. Target, Apple, Amazon, and Starbucks. Now keep in mind, these are not sustainable brands. These are giant, conglomerate, multi-billion-dollar empires. It's really, really difficult, and I personally would go as far as to say impossible to build an empire like these brands have without exploiting people and the planet. So in no way am I saying these brands are sustainable, but I think a lot of you want me to evaluate their sustainability claims, and in the case of like Walmart and Target, compare them to one another and see which one has a better environmental policy. And like I said, it's pretty much impossible to build an empire like these brands have without exploiting the planet, but also people. So even if their environmental policies look good, you really have to think about all the different human rights violations they've posed, the lack of living wages happening in these businesses while they gain billions and billions of dollars worth of wealth, and all the problems that come along with that, okay? I'm acknowledging that before we go into this so that you don't have to comment on it every time. There's so many disclaimers I need to give before I jump into this, but one other thing I want to note is that a lot of these brands are taking these actions because they know that it's going to be required of them eventually. The laws and the regulations are changing, and they're going to have to implement these things according to government law rather than just voluntarily, which is what they're doing now. And that doesn't really take away from the impact of their changes. It's just to say that most of the time, these brands are not doing this to be like philanthropic. They're doing it because they have to. And another thing that's really, really important as we look through their sustainability pages, reports, and all that sort of stuff is that most of the things that these brands are bragging about are their goals. Not things they've done, not things they're doing. That's like to say that they're going to be more sustainable in the future, but right now, not so much. And last but not least, I will mention their direct to consumer, like sustainability, that sort of stuff. Like basically, can you walk into this store and do something sustainable? Is it a sustainable option for you personally? But for me, what this video is really focusing on is their sustainability reports and how they're tackling their environmental footprint on their own, because their environmental footprints are much more massive than ours, and so they need to be taking action. And I think that when we see a business that's huge taking those actions, then we can say that they're okay to support, and I'm hoping that's what you want to get out of this video, because that's what we're about to do. Okay, let's jump into it. So Walmart. From a consumer standpoint, from what you can go into their store and buy, I honestly don't think they're the best, but they do have some options now. Like I think there's literally one shampoo bar on their shelves. Personally, where I live, Walmart's even sometimes have bulk bins for things like rice and beans and peppers and stuff like that, which is cool, but I don't even know how to say it. It's like crumbs in terms of sustainability. But like I said, Walmart is a brand that I normally boycott because I have the privilege to do so. So if you have a totally different experience with Walmart, let us know in the comments. But that doesn't take away from the fact that their environmental impact and their exploitation of humans is horrible. It's horrible. So let's read about what their goals are and maybe some things that they've already accomplished. One of the first things I noticed off the bat is that their sustainability report is an ESG report. Basically meaning that this sustainability report is not really, how do I say this? This is not something they're doing out of the kindness of their heart or because they care about the planet. An ESG report is basically what tells the stock market what ranking you will have for the ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance. So basically when you go to buy a stock, if you want to evaluate it by those things, by those values, you look at reports like this and it determines that score. And so they're basically trying to up their ESG score for their stakeholders to make more money. That's what this report's about. And in this report from Walmart is the perfect example of what I said in the beginning about brands changing what they're doing in their stances because they know the government is eventually going to make them. There are going to be regulations because we're all going to need to move to a more sustainable future. Well, right here it says that Walmart aims to use 50% renewable energy by 2025. But right next to it, it shows that the data and the actual like just general grid will have made it to that point by then anyway. Meaning that by 2050, everyone's energy will come from around 50% renewables. So they've set this goal, but it's just running in line with what the utilities are already working towards. And that shit really pisses me off. I don't fucking appreciate that being in a sustainability report about what you're doing when you're not even the ones doing it. That's frustrating to me. Now, I will give them credit that they have reduced their emissions over the last like 5 to 10 years, which again is just kind of what happens as we progress into a more sustainable world. They've kind of kept up with what market is expected to do, but they have a report for it, so good for them. But let me tell you something I am impressed by from Walmart and what I'd like to see more brands do. We all know Walmart, at least if you live in the US, I'm not sure how it is outside, but in the US, Walmart is the largest employer in this country. And they also sell the most of goods. I mean, maybe second to Amazon now, but in general, they sell a lot of goods. So a lot of brands are in their stores. And so when Walmart takes a stance and says that we're going to change our supply chain, we're going to make our suppliers do this in order to be sold in our stores, that has a massive ripple effect. What I found interesting about this is Walmart kind of broke down where their environmental impact is coming from, and most of Walmart's emissions are coming from their supply chain. So what they decided to do is actually engage their suppliers and say, you're going to have to meet these standards in order to be sold in Walmart. And that's how big corporations can make big changes that actually fucking matter. So I really like that Walmart is making a big part of their sustainability report about this. That is impressive. And again, I say these are goals and they haven't achieved all of them, or really from their report doesn't seem like any of them yet. But this is what we want to see from corporations to actually have a significant change in the market and use their power for good. So those are kind of my thoughts on their emissions, goals, strategies, and all that kind of stuff. And then when it comes to waste, right? Most people are phrasing this as circular economy. They're talking about how they're trying to make their business practices more circular in their sustainability reports. But basically, all that they've provided here is things that the steps they're taking towards circularity are all consumer based. What I mean by that is they're not providing like returnable, reusable, refillable, or anything like that options in their store. They're basically just giving consumers options to donate or recycle in their stores. And if a brand doesn't change the way that we like receive and refill products or something to that effect, how many consumers are going to bring back their stuff to Walmart to recycle it? Honestly, not that many. Yeah, their stance on reducing waste in like a circular economy is like not good. So this is what we get from their sustainability report. Some things I'm really impressed by, like I said, is their ability to change suppliers. I love that. That's how we're going to see large scale change in using our powers, Walmart's powers for good. And then the rest of it is just kind of like meaningless, all words, all talk, and not really that big of a deal. But what you don't see in these sustainability reports are all of the violations in human rights and to the planet that these sellers have caused, or these sellers and the products that they back and that they sell and all that sort of stuff. So let's just, at the end of each of these little segments, I'm going to play you a little montage of things not in the sustainability report that are not so great about these brands. Next brand, personally, in my opinion, better than Walmart in many, many ways. And first, like I said, I'm always going to talk about direct to consumer, things like you and me. And Target definitely has a lot more options for sustainable things than Walmart does. I mean, Target sells some of my favorite brands like Stasher, Native, Grove, Pila. They're all in Target, which is impressive. It's very impressive. Target's clothing also over the last few years has become really popular, and they actually have a lot of recycled materials in their clothing. They have fair trade certified clothing, and Target has a $15 minimum wage. Most of these brands don't have that, and so I think that that's at least, you know, a leg up for Target, at least from Walmart. They're not perfect, but you know what I mean. And while that's all fine and great and whatnot, I don't think direct to consumer is a solution to solving the environmental crisis we face. So let's see what Target's doing about their environmental footprint. First up in their sustainability report, they don't just focus on sustainability, so like sustaining our environment, they actually use the word regenerative, which is really impressive because that is a step beyond what is already expected, right? I keep talking about how these brands are doing these things because they're expected to, they have to, they see it coming, but taking it that step beyond just talking about sustainability and talking about regeneration is more than that. So I'm impressed by that right off the bat, but also I'm impressed because their goal is to be net zero by 2040, which is ahead of the Paris Climate Agreement and ahead of a lot of the brands that are on this list. And they've already made major improvements, but what I really like about this 2040 net zero goal is it's not just about emissions, it's also about waste. Their goal is to be zero waste to landfill by 2040. That's a pretty big deal. I don't mean to compare everything to Walmart, but just in general, if you're comparing their goals to get to renewables 50% by 2025, which is in line with just the grid, Target is already getting 50% of their energy from renewables. It's not just a goal, it's something they've already done. Now, something I did notice that I think is better from Walmart than from Target is that they are engaging their suppliers, right? They have a lot of power in the market, and using that can change a lot of things. Target seems to have taken a different approach in basically making the mission of their business to be more sustainable kind of on the consumer, direct consumer front, and offering and curating different sustainable brands. It's actually in their sustainability report that part of their goal, or a pretty significant part of their goal, is to curate the largest selection of sustainable brands that are easy for consumers to buy. But the sustainability report doesn't say that they're not going to engage their suppliers. It actually mentions that they will. That's not their focus right now. It says that that's going to become their focus within the next few years. One complaint I do have about Target's sustainability report compared to all the other ones I had to read for this video is that it is very short. Some of them are really long and dry, and if you don't have a science background and you haven't had to read through literal sustainability reports and summarize them before, would not be something that you're able to do. Some of them are really comprehensive. We'll talk about that one next. And then some were just not enough. Like, there wasn't enough information about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I feel like Target's was like that. And probably if I kept digging and digging, like I had to with some other brands in this video, I could find more information, but I just think it should be much more like forward about it, if that makes sense. But Target is not perfect, and so here is the section of here's what's not in the sustainability report. Next up, we have Apple. You probably know how I feel about Apple, how I feel about tech in general. I buy all of my doodads for this channel secondhand because I think tech has a massive environmental footprint. Not enough people talk about it, and so I don't ever want to buy tech new. I always buy it secondhand. But what I'm going to tell you right off the bat is that Apple is carbon neutral. Already. Their goal is not to be it by 2030, 2040, 2050. They are already carbon neutral. I find what Apple is doing to be very impressive, which I hate to say because I don't want to buy from them. So carbon neutral for all of their operations, right? Running their retail stores, their corporate offices, all that sort of stuff, carbon neutral. Now they do have a goal for 2030, and that is to offset the footprint of every product so that everything you buy from Apple will be a carbon neutral product. This is way ahead of schedule from every other brand I've seen. And like I mentioned when I was talking about Target, all the sustainability reports are totally different in ranking of ease to read. So Walmart's was super dry, a lot of information. Target's was not a lot of information, but pretty comprehensive. Apple's is the perfect amount of so much information, but very easy to comprehend. You don't have to have a science background to read through it and understand what's going on. I was really impressed by Apple's website. So some of the ways that they plan to reduce their emissions, a lot of people disagree with. You might have heard recently that Apple took their charging ports out of their iPhone, so when they sell them, they don't give you a new one. I understand why some people are really upset about this. I think there's definitely room for constructive and like valid criticism of this, but as an environmentalist, I like to say that, hey Apple, if you're not going to give us cords or ports anymore, make sure that the ones that we're buying from your store are going to last us for years. But the reason that Apple says they did this is because it's going to save 861,000 tons of copper, tin, and zinc from being mined from the earth. This also means that the packaging of the iPhones can be smaller, and according to them, this means they can fit 70% more iPhones in a package on a truck, thereby reducing the environmental impacts and emissions overall. So I talked a little bit about how a lot of these sustainability reports are broken down into 3 scopes, 1, 2, and 3, and usually that means like their business operations, their corporate operations, and that sort of stuff, and then their supply chain. And I find that most emissions are coming from their supply chains. But a lot of these brands, as I was reading through their reports, are still focused on scope 1 and 2 and reducing their emissions in their business model. Whereas Apple already has their emissions from that part of their supply chain down to less than 1% of their total emissions. So now they're already starting to focus on their supply chain, and there's a lot of things they've already done to make it better. Here's a list of some of them. They use 99% recycled tungsten in the iPhone 12 and Apple Watch Series 6. 40% of all materials in MacBook Air Retina displays come from recycled sources. Their Restore Fund will invest up to $200 million in natural climate solutions. 100% renewable energy source for all Apple facilities. They have an entire green bond program that spent $330 million in 2020 to fund solutions to their carbon footprint. And they even got their suppliers to commit to 100% renewable energy. Honestly, Apple's sustainability report is really impressive because it's not full of goals for the future. It's full of things that they've already accomplished. And I really think that they're headed in a good direction. But the problem with Apple is we can't forget about the entire huge selection of human rights violations they have imposed throughout their supply chain. I actually have a whole video talking about it. I'll link it up here. But here's a section of the video where we talk about what's not in the sustainability report. Amazon, everyone's favorite brand, right? No, really, it is probably like 90% of Americans' favorite brand. The thing that Amazon is banking right now, and the thing that they get the most brownie points, the thing they promote the most, the thing that is at the forefront of their sustainability initiatives, because it was hard to dig to find anything more than the Climate Pledge, which pledges that they will be carbon neutral by 2040. Their bragging point here is that that's 10 years ahead of the Paris Climate Agreement, but let me tell you why I don't think the Climate Pledge is all they try to crack it up to be. What Amazon did is they created this pledge that said people will go carbon neutral by 2040, which, by the way, just to find what the pledge meant took a lot of digging to find that what are they pledging? What is the pledge that they're making? And it's literally just that they will be carbon neutral by 2040, or net zero emissions by 2040. In order to get that little Climate Pledge button on their Amazon page, they just have to sign this pledge without any reports as to how they're going to get there, without any steps as to how Amazon recommends they get there, without seemingly very much assistance from Amazon. They sign Amazon's pledge, they get a Climate Pledge friendly button on their Amazon, and now all of a sudden everybody thinks that Amazon is some miracle worker and reduce their carbon footprint by a massive amount. But after a lot of digging, literally clicking on 5 different links on 5 different pages and downloading a PDF, I found what this pledge is saying that they are going to be doing aside from just being carbon neutral by 2040. And let me tell you, there's not much detail, there's not much strategy. There's 3 key things that you are agreeing to do when you sign this pledge. Number 1, they'll do regular reporting. Without any information here on how often or how long the report needs to be or what the report needs to cover, that's one of the things that's in the pledge you have to report. Carbon elimination, so basically reducing your carbon footprint, again, without any details as to how to do that. I mean, they list options of things that you can do, like renewable energy. It's just so vague, it's just so vague. And last but not least, third part of the 2040 Climate Pledge, to get that stamp next to your name on the Amazon website, is offsets. This is not to say that these brands won't actually be carbon neutral or net zero by 2040, because many of them may very well be. But the question is always, how are they going to get there and who's going to hold them accountable to do so? And it seems like a lot of brands these days are getting their brownie points and their good points of environmental stewardship just by saying they're going to do something, and it's very frustrating to see. And specifically, the Amazon Climate Pledge is just, it's a little irritating on my end. Now, I will say Amazon is the largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy, I believe. They have 15 different utility-sized wind farms and aim to get 80% of their energy from renewables by 2024 and 100% by 2030. They've also purchased a fleet of 100,000 electric vehicle delivery vans so that they can switch over from their gas to electric, which if most of their electric is coming from renewables, I think that's a really good step. That's actually, because they've already purchased the vans, they've already spent the money to do this, and it's actually happening currently. It's not just a goal. I think that is an impressive thing that they've done. But let me just tell you, the most frustrating thing about Amazon is it basically ends at the climate pledge. As I tried to dig, and that's also what's frustrating, this information is very hidden on their website. I had to dig a lot to find any information. Much of their sustainability page talks about the climate pledge. Even when I go to their circularity page, which was very, very, very lacking in anything that was actually hinting towards a circular economy, even that page, half of it was spent talking about the climate pledge. Which climate and waste, yes, they are intersectional a little bit, but they need to have their own approach as to how you're going to solve it. And considering the waste that comes from Amazon, it's really frustrating to me that there was none of that in this report. I do have an old video where I talk about how you can be more sustainable with your Amazon purchases, which I guess I'll link up here, because I know that even if Amazon is not doing great, and even if Amazon is a horrible company, and even if the internet has demonized Jeff Bezos, still the fact remains that most people are shopping on there. And so acting like we can just pretend like we're going to convince millions of people around the world, billions at this point, to give up convenience in the name of the planet, I don't think that's happening. So roll the section where we talk about what's not in the sustainability report. And Starbucks, one of the United States' favorite businesses. They are huge, massive. Let's talk about if they're sustainable. One of the things right off the bat that I was impressed by is that, like Target, they mentioned regeneration in their sustainability report, not just sustainability. And so that shows me that the brand is taking a step beyond what is already expected, what is already coming down the regulation pipeline, and I love to see that. Something else I like about Starbucks' sustainability report is their goals are only set 10 years into the future, not 20 and 30 and 40 and all that kind of stuff that you see. They're planning to get these goals accomplished pretty quickly. But then what got a little bit weird about this sustainability report in general is that it wasn't really a report. It was basically like they were saying, here are our goals over the next 10 years, learn more. And then whenever you click learn more, it was basically just a bunch of self-written articles and blogs about things that they're working on, which is not a report. It doesn't have hard evidence, hard numbers, ways that they're implementing these plans. It doesn't have all the details that like you would need to know to evaluate if they're actually doing something meaningful for sustainability. When I finally did some digging and found their sustainability report card, I actually found that most of their goals had been met, but they actually disclose in said report that it's because of the changes they made for COVID. So from 2019 to 2020, their emissions reduced dramatically, but it was due to the fact that most of their stores were either closed or running on limited capacity. Actually, their whole sustainability report is really, really thrown out of whack because of COVID, which I found interesting because most of the other brands didn't mention COVID at all in their sustainability reports, but it seems that Starbucks was impacted really, really heavily by the pandemic. And so at the end of the day, it was kind of hard to evaluate Starbucks on if they're actually like doing what's worthy of sustainability or not, because unless I'm just judging them by their goals, which I didn't really want to do, it's all skewed because of COVID. And they actually do have goals that are pretty good, but I think there's not enough really to evaluate Starbucks in general. Some of the things that I know about Starbucks that I guess I can speak on, because I'm sure people have asked me many times. Number one is when they got a lot of publicity for working to ban straws, which they were supposed to have done, I believe, by 2021 when they originally set the goal, and they definitely haven't done that. They literally still give straws out. But that was completely a PR grab in my opinion, because the lids actually had more plastic than if they had just kept the original lids and used the straws. And the other part of that was really, really frustrating is that a lot of the Starbucks were still giving out straws in addition to those lids that have more plastic. And also let me know in the comments if your Starbucks will let you bring your reusable cup right now, because here they will not let me. They always go, I can give you the discount. And I'm like, that's not the point. And another thing that they've done recently that seems to be more of a PR stunt than anything is their pilot to have cups where you can get a reusable at Starbucks, leave, and bring it back. They'll sanitize it and they continue to use these. I feel like this is a PR stunt because what a lot of brands do with things like this is they pilot it in like 1 or 2 stores and then they get all the publicity for it and it never makes it out to the other stores. Like, I doubt that's ever gonna make it to my Starbucks down the street. So unfortunately, I really couldn't evaluate Starbucks beyond just that, but let's go to the clip that's what's not in the sustainability report. So I didn't really call it out for each brand, but here is the ranking that I decided each of these brands deserve. This is not on, like, these brands are not ranking along with sustainable brands that I've talked about in the past. These are just ranked in their own category, okay? These are not in comparison to sustainable brands, but with the ranking being within these 5 brands, I think this is how it should look. At the end of the day, honestly, multi-billion-dollar corporations are never going to be the most sustainable choice, and it's definitely a privilege to be able to choose like smaller producers or things that cost more. And at the end of the day, it's honestly a privilege to even have access to something other than these giant exploitative brands. But I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up for me. I recently found out that apparently that matters a lot in YouTube, so I would highly appreciate it. Go follow me on Instagram so that you can leave me the brands that you wanted me to evaluate next in this series. And remember, until next time, you cannot do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good that you can do. Bye, guys.